I'm not taking revenge. I'm restoring balance.
They say revenge is a dish best served cold. What they don't tell you is that sometimes it takes 3 years of careful planning to get the temperature just right. My name is David Mitchell, and I used to think I was living the American dream. 42 years old, successful tech investor, beautiful wife, luxury apartment overlooking downtown Seattle. The kind of life that looks perfect from the outside, like a magazine spread come to life. I should have known it was too good to be true. The first crack in my perfect world appeared on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in my home office, reviewing quarterly reports for the tech startups in my portfolio, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife isn't working late at the office. Check the Fairmont Hotel, room 1247. You deserve to know the truth. My first instinct was to delete it. Anonymous tips are usually from cranks or competitors trying to stir up trouble. But something about the specificity of it nagged at me. Room 1247. Why would someone make up such a detailed lie? I called Rebecca's office. Her assistant, Janet, answered, in her usual cheerful tone. Hi, Mr. Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell is in meetings all afternoon. Should I have her call you back? What kind of meetings? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Oh, you know, the usual board stuff. Strategic planning with the executive team. She said she'd be here until at least 9 tonight. I thanked Janet and hung up, staring at the anonymous text. Rebecca had been working late a lot recently. As CEO of Next Gen Solutions, the software company I'd helped fund and grow, she carried a heavy workload. It made sense that she'd have long days. But the Fairmont Hotel was only 6 blocks from her office. Why would someone specifically mention that location? I tried to focus on my work, but the text kept pulling at my attention like a splinter under the skin. By 3 o'clock, I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The Fairmont Hotel sits in the heart of Seattle's business district, all glass and steel, reaching toward the gray sky. I'd attended countless corporate events there over the years. The lobby was familiar territory. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted. I took the elevator to the 12th floor, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was insane. I was acting like some paranoid husband from a bad movie. Rebecca and I had our problems. What couple didn't after 15 years of marriage? But she wasn't a cheater. She was ambitious, driven, sometimes cold, but not unfaithful. Room 1247 was at the end of a long hallway. I stood outside the door for a full minute, listening. Nothing. Maybe this was all a sick joke. Maybe I should just go home and pretend this never happened. Then I heard her laugh. Rebecca has a distinctive laugh, low and throaty, the kind that made me fall in love with her back in college. I'd know that sound anywhere. It was coming from inside the room, followed by a man's voice I didn't recognize. You're incredible, the voice said. I can't believe we waited so long to do this. David's been so distracted with his investments lately, Rebecca replied. He barely notices when I'm gone. It's perfect timing. The words hit me like a physical blow. I pressed my ear closer to the door, hardly breathing. What if he finds out? The man asked. He won't. David's brilliant with numbers and technology, but he's clueless about people. He trusts everyone, especially me. It's almost sweet how naive he is. They both laughed at that. The sound made my stomach turn. I backed away from the door on unsteady legs. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. The elegant wallpaper, the soft lighting, the thick carpet. Everything felt surreal, like I was walking through someone else's nightmare. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked exactly the same as I had an hour ago. Brown hair going gray at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses, the face of a man who spent his days reading financial reports and attending board meetings. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. I drove home in a daze, Rebecca's words echoing in my head. He's clueless about people. Almost sweet how naive he is. 15 years of marriage, and that's what she really thought of me. Our apartment felt different when I walked in. The modern furniture, the expensive art on the walls, the view of Elliott Bay. It all belonged to strangers now. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my leather chair, staring out at the water. Rebecca came home at 9:30, exactly when she'd told Janet she would. She looked perfect, as always. Blonde hair in a sleek bob, designer suit without a wrinkle, makeup flawless. No signs of an afternoon spent in a hotel room with another man. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing my cheek with cool lips. "Fine," I said. "How are your meetings?" "Exhausting. The board is pushing for faster growth, but they don't want to increase the marketing budget. It's like they expect miracles." She kicked off her heels and headed for the kitchen. "I'm thinking of ordering Thai food. You interested?" I watched her move around our kitchen with practiced efficiency, opening wine, checking her phone, acting like the devoted wife coming home after a long day at the office. The performance was flawless. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "do you ever think about us? About our marriage?" She glanced up from her phone, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you happy? Really happy?" For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Then her expression smoothed back into polite interest. "Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that? You've been working so much lately. We barely see each other. David, you know how important NextGen is to me. To us. The company's at a crucial stage right now. Once we get through this growth phase, things will calm down." She came over and perched on the arm of my chair, running her fingers through my hair. The gesture felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. "Besides," she continued, "you've been pretty distracted yourself. When's the last time we had a real conversation about something other than work?" She was right, and that made it worse. We've been drifting apart for months, maybe years. I'd been so focused on building my investment portfolio that I'd stopped paying attention to my wife. But that didn't excuse what she was doing. "You're right," I said. "Maybe we should plan a vacation. Get away from work for a while." "That sounds nice. After the quarterly board meeting next month, okay?" She kissed the top of my head and went back to ordering dinner. The conversation dismissed. I sat there watching her, marveling at how easy it was for her to lie. How long had she been doing it? How many other afternoons at the Fairmont Hotel had there been? That night, lying in bed next to my cheating wife, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to file for divorce and split our assets 50-50. I wasn't going to be the naive, trusting husband she thought I was. I was going to find out exactly what Rebecca was up to, and then I was going to destroy her. The next morning, I called Tommy Brennan. Tommy and I went way back. College roommates at the University of Washington. Best man at each other's weddings. The kind of friendship that survives decades of different life paths. While I'd gone into finance and technology, Tommy had become a private investigator after a stint as a Seattle police detective. He specialized in corporate espionage and infidelity cases, which made him perfect for what I needed. "David Mitchell," he said when he answered the phone. "Haven't heard from you in months. What's going on?" "I need your help, Tommy. Professional help." There was a pause. "What kind of professional help?" "The kind you do for clients who think their spouses are cheating." Another pause. Longer this time. "Crap, David. I'm sorry. You want to meet somewhere?" We arranged to meet at Pike Place Market, in the back corner of a coffee shop that stayed busy enough to mask our conversation. Tommy looked exactly the same as he had in college. Stocky build, receding hairline, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He'd always been the street-smart one in our friendship, the guy who could read people like books while I buried my nose in spreadsheets. "Tell me what's going on," he said after we'd ordered coffee. I gave him the basics. The anonymous text, the hotel room, the conversation I'd overheard. Tommy listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes in a small leather notebook. "How long do you think this has been going on?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know. Maybe months? She's been working late more often, taking weekend trips for conferences that I never bothered to verify. God, I feel like an idiot." "Don't. Cheaters get good at hiding things, especially smart ones. And your wife is definitely smart." Tommy closed his notebook. "The question is, what do you want to do about it?" Some guys just want confirmation so they can file for divorce. Others want ammunition for the settlement negotiations. A few want to know everything. Who, when, where, how long, the whole story. Everything, I said without hesitation. I want to know exactly what she's been doing, who she's doing it with, and how deep this goes. Tommy nodded. That's going to take time and money. Full surveillance, background checks, digital forensics if necessary. We're talking weeks, maybe months of investigation. Money's not an issue, and I've got time. Okay, but David, you need to understand something. Once we start down this road, there's no going back. You're going to learn things about your wife that you can't unknow. Are you sure you're ready for that? I thought about Rebecca's laugh in that hotel room, her casual dismissal of my intelligence, the way she'd lied to my face without blinking. I'm ready. Tommy spent the next 2 weeks building a comprehensive picture of Rebecca's activities. He was thorough and professional, providing daily reports that read like something from a spy novel. The man in the hotel room was Marcus Webb, 34 years old, recently divorced, a management consultant who'd been hired by NextGen's board to help streamline operations. He was everything I wasn't: tall, athletic, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and drove a Porsche. According to Tommy's research, he'd been working with Rebecca for 3 months. The affair had started 6 weeks ago. Always at the Fairmont Hotel. Always on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. They'd been careful. Separate arrivals, cash payments, no digital trail. If not for that anonymous text, I might never have found out. But the more Tommy dug, the more complicated the picture became. There's something else, he said during one of our coffee shop meetings. This Marcus Webb guy, he's not just sleeping with your wife. He's been feeding information to NextGen's competitors. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Industrial espionage. He's got access to all of Rebecca's strategic plans, client lists, proprietary software designs. My sources say he's been selling that information to at least 2 rival companies. The implications hit me like a truck. NextGen wasn't just my wife's company. I was the primary investor. My money had funded its growth. My connections had brought in major clients. If Marcus was stealing trade secrets, he wasn't just betraying Rebecca. He was stealing from me. Does Rebecca know? I asked. Tommy shrugged. Hard to say. Either she's in on it, or she's being played just as hard as you are. I watched Rebecca over dinner, trying to read her face for signs of deception beyond the obvious affair. She was talking about a new client presentation, her eyes bright with enthusiasm, hands gesturing as she described the technical challenges they were solving. Was she a co-conspirator in corporate espionage? Or just a woman having an affair with the wrong man? Did it matter? Either way, she'd betrayed everything we'd built together. David, she said, you're not listening. They're sorry. Long day. What were you saying about the presentation? I was saying that Marcus thinks we should restructure the entire client onboarding process. He's got some really innovative ideas about workflow optimization. Marcus thinks. Marcus has ideas. I wondered if she realized how often she mentioned him, how her voice changed when she said his name. This Marcus guy sounds pretty impressive, I said casually. He is. The board made a smart choice bringing him in. He's already identified several areas where we can improve efficiency. I'll bet he has, I thought. Over the next week, Tommy's reports painted an increasingly damaging picture. Marcus Webb had a history of this. He'd been fired from 2 previous consulting jobs for ethics violations, though the details were buried in sealed legal settlements. He targeted successful companies with female executives, using seduction as a tool for corporate espionage. Rebecca wasn't his first victim, and she probably wouldn't be his last. The anonymous tip that had started this whole investigation, that came from Marcus's ex-wife, a woman named Jennifer Carlisle, who'd been tracking his activities since their divorce. She'd sent similar warnings to the wives of his previous targets, trying to stop him from destroying more marriages and companies. She wants to meet with you, Tommy said. Says she has information that could help. Jennifer Carlisle was a small, intense woman with prematurely gray hair and the kind of quiet anger that comes from being betrayed by someone you trusted completely. We met at a restaurant in Bellevue, far enough from downtown Seattle to avoid any chance encounters with Rebecca or her colleagues. Marcus is a predator, she said without preamble. He targets successful women in positions of power, seduces them, steals their company's secrets, and moves on to the next victim. He did it to me, and now he's doing it to your wife. How long were you married? I asked. 8 years. I thought I knew him, thought we had a good marriage. Then I found out he'd been cheating on me with 3 different women, all executives at companies he was consulting for. By the time I figured out what he was doing, he'd already sold my company's client database to our biggest competitor. She pulled out a thick manila folder and slid it across the table. Financial records, email printouts, phone logs, everything I could gather before our divorce was finalized. Marcus is systematic about this. He keeps detailed records of his targets, their companies, their vulnerabilities. Your wife isn't just an affair to him. She's a business opportunity. I flipped through the folder, my anger building with each page. Bank deposits that corresponded to major next-gen announcements. Email chains discussing client strategies that had somehow ended up in competitors' hands. Phone calls to rival companies that lasted hours. Why are you helping me? I asked. Because I know what it's like to be played by someone you trust. And because Marcus needs to be stopped. He's destroyed too many lives, too many companies. Maybe if enough of his victims fight back, he'll finally face consequences. That night, I sat in my study with Jennifer's evidence spread across my desk like pieces of a puzzle. The picture they formed was devastating. Marcus Webb wasn't just stealing from NextGen. He was systematically dismantling everything I'd worked to build. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me, just like Rebecca had. They both saw me as the naive, trusting husband who was too focused on numbers to notice what was happening right under his nose. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Setting a trap for someone requires patience, precision, and a deep understanding of your target's weaknesses. Marcus Webb's weakness was his arrogance. He'd gotten away with corporate espionage for so long that he'd become careless, confident that his charm and good looks made him untouchable. Rebecca's weakness was simpler. She genuinely believed I was stupid. I spent 2 weeks crafting the perfect bait. First, I created a fake investment opportunity, a revolutionary new software platform that could supposedly process financial transactions 50 times faster than existing systems. I wrote up detailed technical specifications, complete with patents pending and prototype demonstrations. To anyone in the tech industry, it would look like the kind of breakthrough that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Then, I made sure Rebecca would find out about it. I'm thinking about pulling back from NextGen, I told her over breakfast on a Thursday morning. I've got an opportunity that requires more capital than I have available. Rebecca looked up from her phone, suddenly interested. What kind of opportunity? A startup in Silicon Valley. I imagined slowly ready for Stillingly. I continue to be these nights, explained them 2 hours well. A startup in Rivi. The startup in Marcus was changing for global tech himself forth. Attemption sparked other things local in content that I was seeing. I found that was close to be studying a little bit of somewhere. I spent 2 weeks. I started normally in Silicon Valley. They've developed something that could revolutionize financial services. The early investors are going to make a fortune, but I'd need to liquidate some of my next-gen holdings to get in at the ground floor. I could see the wheels turning in her head. If I sold my next-gen shares, she'd lose her primary source of funding. But if this new opportunity was as big as I was suggesting, she'd want to know everything about it. Tell me more, she said, setting down her phone. I gave her just enough detail to pique her curiosity. The name of the fake company, the general concept, the potential market size. I made it sound like the kind of insider information that could be incredibly valuable to the right buyer. You should be careful about discussing confidential investment opportunities, she said. You wouldn't want that information getting into the wrong hands. You're right. I probably shouldn't have mentioned it. But I trust you completely. The irony was so thick I could taste it. That afternoon, Tommy confirmed that Rebecca had immediately called Marcus after I left for the office. They'd met at their usual hotel room, and their conversation had lasted 3 hours instead of the usual 90 minutes. She took the bait, Tommy reported. My contact at the hotel Says they ordered room service and spread a bunch of papers across the bed. Looked like they were taking notes. Phase 2 of my plan involved my brother-in-law, Kevin. Kevin Hartley was Rebecca's younger brother, and everything I'd learned to despise about entitled rich kids. He'd never held a real job, living off a trust fund and his sister's generosity, while pursuing a series of failed business ventures. Rebecca had given him a nominal position at NextGen, Director of Strategic Partnerships, which mostly involved showing up to office parties and taking clients to expensive lunches. Kevin had always resented me. I represented everything he wasn't: self-made success, genuine intelligence, the respect of his sister. He'd spent years making snide comments about my background, my clothes, my lack of social connections. Rebecca always defended him, dismissing his behavior as harmless sibling rivalry. Now, I was going to use his jealousy against both of them. I arranged to meet Kevin at his favorite bar, an overpriced cocktail lounge in Belltown, where he liked to hold court with other trust fund babies and wannabe entrepreneurs. He was already 3 drinks in when I arrived, holding forth to a table of admirers about his latest business idea. "David," he called out when he saw me, "come join us. I was just telling everyone about the cryptocurrency exchange I'm developing." I sat down and ordered a bourbon, listening to Kevin's pitch with the kind of polite attention I'd perfected over years of family dinners. His idea was predictably terrible. A crypto exchange that somehow involved social media influencers and sustainable energy. The kind of concept that sounded impressive to people who didn't understand technology or finance. After his audience drifted away, Kevin leaned closer to me, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, David, I've been thinking. You and I should work together more. Pool our resources, share opportunities. We're family, after all." "That's interesting," I said. "What kind of opportunities did you have in mind?" "Well, for instance, Rebecca mentioned that you're looking at some hot new startup in California. Something about financial software? Maybe there's room for another investor." There it was. Rebecca had told Kevin about my fake investment opportunity, probably hoping he could charm more details out of me. Or maybe Kevin had overheard her talking to Marcus. Either way, my trap was working exactly as planned. "I don't know, Kevin. It's a pretty exclusive deal. Limited investor slots. High minimum buy-in. Not really the kind of thing I can share casually." Kevin's, "Come on, David. I've got capital to invest, and I bring more to the table than just money. I've got connections, market insight, strategic vision." Strategic vision. The man who'd blown through $2 million on a failed artisanal soap company thought he had strategic vision. "Tell you what," I said. "Let me think about it. Maybe there's a way to work something out." I finished my drink and left Kevin sitting at the bar, probably already planning how he'd spend his imaginary profits. The next morning, Tommy called with an update. "Your brother-in-law contacted Marcus Webb last night. They met at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. My guy got some photos, but couldn't get close enough for audio. That's okay. I know what they were talking about. Beautiful thing about greedy people is how predictable they are. Kevin wanted in on my fake investment opportunity. Marcus wanted the inside information he could sell to competitors. Rebecca wanted to maintain her funding while potentially profiting from my business secrets. They were all so focused on what they could take from me that they'd walked straight into my trap. Phase 3 involved my oldest friend in Seattle, Jim Patterson. Jim and I had known each other since graduate school. He'd built a successful venture capital firm, and we'd collaborated on dozens of investments over the years. More importantly, Jim was one of the few people Rebecca genuinely respected. When he talked about business opportunities, she listened. "I need a favor," I told Jim over lunch at our usual spot, a quiet restaurant near the waterfront. "Name it." "I need you to ask Rebecca about a fake investment opportunity. Make it seem like you heard rumors about something I'm working on, and you want to verify the details." Jim raised an eyebrow. "This sounds like it's going to be complicated." I explained the situation, the affair, and the truth, and remindering and thanking. I tapped her the meth at the time Love did. I strung with Review into the next week. Jim raised an eyebrow. The affair, the corporate espionage, my plan to expose everything. Jim listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. Jesus, David. I'm sorry. I had no idea Rebecca was capable of this. Neither did I, but I need to catch them in the act, and I need witnesses who can't be dismissed as biased or unreliable. Your reputation is unimpeachable. If you testify that Rebecca was trying to sell confidential information, people will believe you. Jim agreed to help, though he insisted on reviewing all the evidence Tommy had gathered first. He was a careful man, and he wanted to make sure we weren't making any mistakes that could come back to haunt us later. 2 days later, Jim called Rebecca and asked if they could meet for coffee. He told her he'd heard through the grapevine that I was involved in something big, and he was wondering if NextGen might be interested in partnering on the deal. Rebecca took the meeting immediately. Tommy had positioned surveillance equipment in the coffee shop where they met, capturing both audio and video of their conversation. The recording was devastating. Rebecca not only confirmed the existence of my fake investment opportunity, but offered to provide Jim with detailed technical specifications in exchange for a finder's fee. She claimed to have inside access to all of my business dealings, and suggested that Jim could benefit from that access in future deals as well. David trusts me completely, she said on the recording. He discusses all of his investments with me, asks for my advice on strategic decisions. I could be a valuable source of information for someone in your position. Jim played his part perfectly, expressing interest while carefully avoiding any actual commitment. By the end of the conversation, Rebecca had essentially offered to spy on her own husband in exchange for money. The recording was everything I needed to destroy her reputation in Seattle's tight-knit business community. But I wasn't done yet. The final phase of my trap involved Marcus Webb directly. Using a fake identity, I contacted Marcus and claimed to represent a competitor of NextGen's who was interested in purchasing proprietary information. I offered him $50,000 for detailed technical specifications of the fake software platform I'd described to Rebecca. Marcus took the bait immediately. We arranged to meet at a parking garage downtown, a location I'd chosen specifically because it offered multiple camera angles and clear audio recording opportunities. Tommy had the entire area under surveillance, with backup recordings in case anything went wrong. Marcus arrived exactly on time, carrying a briefcase that presumably contained the information he thought he was selling. He was even more arrogant in person than I'd expected. The kind of man who believed his own hype about being irresistible to women and smarter than everyone around him. "You have the specifications?" I asked, maintaining my fake identity. Complete technical documentation, market analysis, investor profiles, everything you need to develop a competing product. Marcus opened his briefcase and showed me a stack of papers. "This is worth a lot more than $50,000, but I'm offering you a discount because I like working with professionals." I pretended to examine the documents while Tommy's cameras captured everything. Marcus had clearly put significant effort into stealing and organizing my fake information. The irony was delicious. He'd worked harder to steal worthless data than he probably had at any legitimate job. "This looks comprehensive," I said. "How did you obtain this information?" Marcus smiled, the expression of a man who thought he was too clever to get caught. "Let's just say I have access to very reliable sources, the kind of sources that can provide ongoing intelligence about your competitors' activities." "You mean Rebecca Mitchell?" Marcus's smile faltered. "I don't discuss my sources." "You don't need to. I already know everything." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo that Tommy had taken of him entering the Fairmont Hotel with Rebecca. "Hello, Marcus. My name is David Mitchell. I believe you know my wife." The color drained from Marcus's face. For a moment, he looked like he might run. Then his arrogance reasserted itself. "You can't prove anything," he said. "And even if you could, what are you going to do about it? Cry to the police? Sue me? You're just another weak husband who couldn't keep his wife satisfied." That's when I smiled. "Actually, Marcus, I'm going to destroy you, and I'm going to enjoy every minute of it." I put my plan into motion. First, I called an emergency board meeting at NextGen. As the company's primary investor, I had the right to demand immediate action when I believed the company's interests were being compromised. The board members, all successful business people who valued their reputations, agreed to meet that afternoon. Then I called Rebecca. "We need to talk," I said when she answered her phone. "I'm in meetings all day, David. Can it wait until tonight?" No, it can't. Meet me at home in 30 minutes. Something in my tone must have gotten through to her, because she agreed without further argument. Rebecca arrived at our apartment looking concerned but not panicked. She still believed she was in control of the situation, that her naive husband might suspect something but couldn't possibly have uncovered the full extent of her betrayal. "What's this about?" she asked, setting down her purse and facing me with the kind of patient expression she might use with a difficult client. "It's about Marcus Webb," I said simply. The change in her expression was immediate and dramatic. Color drained from her face, and her carefully composed features cracked just enough to reveal the panic underneath. "I don't know what you think you know," she began, but I held up my hand to stop her. "I know about the hotel room. I know about the corporate espionage. I know about your plan to sell information about my investments to competitors."
I know everything, Rebecca. Crimson.
She sat down heavily in one of our expensive chairs, her mind clearly racing through options. Deny everything? Try to explain it away? Blame Marcus for manipulating her? "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "Long enough to document everything. Long enough to build a case that will destroy both of you." Rebecca looked up at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Genuine fear. "David, you have to understand. Marcus convinced me that we could make a fortune if we just shared a little information. He said everyone does it, that it's just smart business. I never meant for it to go this far." "So you're admitting that you've been selling my confidential business information?" Unborn, exactly. More like sharing strategic insights with someone who could help us both profit from market opportunities. That rationalization was breathtaking. She'd betrayed our marriage, stolen from my business, and compromised her own company's security. But in her mind, she was just being a savvy entrepreneur. "And the affair?" I asked. "Was that also just smart business?" Rebecca's composure finally cracked completely. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. These weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity from someone who'd finally been caught. "I'm sorry, David. I know I hurt you, but our marriage has been dead for years. We both know that. Marcus made me feel alive again. Made me feel like a woman instead of just a business partner. So you decided to steal from me. I decided to look out for myself. You've been pulling away from me, from us, for months. I needed to know that I'd be okay if you decided to leave." The spelled logic was almost impressive. In Rebecca's mind, her betrayal was actually a form of self-defense against my imagined abandonment. "Well, congratulations," I said. "You've definitely looked out for yourself. Right into a federal investigation for corporate espionage." Her eyes widened. "Federal investigation? Did you really think you could steal trade secrets and sell them to competitors without consequences? Marcus Webb is already under investigation by the FBI. It's only a matter of time before they come for you too." That was a lie, but Rebecca didn't know that, and the fear in her eyes told me she believed it completely. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to resign from NextGen immediately. I want you to sign over your stock options and any claim to company assets. And I want you out of my life, permanently. And if I don't, then I release everything to the media, the FBI, and every business contact we have in Seattle. Your career will be over, your reputation destroyed. You'll be lucky to get a job managing a McDonald's." Rebecca stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to calculate whether I was bluffing. Finally, she seemed to realize that the man she'd married, the trusting, naive husband she thought she could manipulate, was gone. "I'll need time to think about it," she said. "You have until 5 o'clock today. That's when the board meeting starts." After left, I spent the afternoon preparing for the most important presentation of my life. I had hours of surveillance footage, financial records, recorded conversations, and documentary evidence of corporate espionage. By the time I was finished, there would be no doubt about what Rebecca and Marcus had been doing. The NextGen board meeting was held in the company's conference room, a glass-walled space on the 30th floor with panoramic views of Seattle's skyline. The 5 board members, all prominent business leaders I'd known for years, sat around the polished oak table with expressions ranging from curious to concerned. Rebecca arrived 5 minutes late, looking composed but pale. She'd changed into her most conservative business suit and pulled her hair back in a severe bun, probably hoping to project an image of professional competence. Marcus wasn't there. I'd made sure of that by having Tommy tip off building security about an unauthorized visitor who'd been harassing female employees. He was probably sitting in a holding cell somewhere, trying to explain why he'd been carrying corporate documents that didn't belong to him. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," I began, standing at the head of the table. "I've called this meeting because I've discovered evidence of serious misconduct that threatens the future of next-gen solutions." I started with the surveillance footage from the hotel, playing just enough to establish that Rebecca was having an affair with Marcus Webb. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly wondering why they needed to know about their CEO's personal life. Then, I showed them the financial records. Marcus Webb has been systematically stealing proprietary information from NextGen and selling it to our competitors, I explained, clicking through bank deposits that corresponded to major company announcements. Client lists, strategic plans, software specifications. Everything he could access through his relationship with Rebecca. Members' expressions shifted from discomfort to alarm as they realized the implications. "Are you saying that Mrs. Mitchell was involved in corporate espionage?" asked Helen Chang, the board's senior member. "I'm saying that Rebecca provided Marcus Webb with confidential information, knowing that he intended to sell it to competitors. Whether she did this knowingly or was manipulated into it, the result is the same. NextGen's competitive advantages have been compromised." I played the recording of Rebecca's conversation with Jim Patterson, where she'd offered to spy on me in exchange for money. The room fell completely silent as her voice filled the air, casually discussing the betrayal of her own husband's trust. "This recording was made 3 days ago," I said when it finished. "Rebecca was actively attempting to sell confidential information about my investment activities to a third party." Fleming finally spoke up. "David, you're taking this out of context. I was just..." "Missionary. Glenn, you were just what, Rebecca? Just committing industrial espionage? Just betraying the trust of every person in this room?" Shell fell silent, realizing that anything she said would only make things worse. I spent the next hour walking the board through every piece of evidence Tommy had gathered. By the time I finished, there was no doubt about what had happened, or who was responsible. "What do you recommend we do?" asked Robert Kim, the board's legal counsel. "I recommend that Rebecca resign immediately and forfeit all stock options and severance benefits. I recommend that we terminate our relationship with Marcus Webb and pursue legal action for theft of trade secrets. And I recommend that we conduct a complete security audit to determine what information has been compromised." Missionary. The board voted unanimously to accept my recommendations. Rebecca sat through the entire vote in stunned silence, watching 15 years of career advancement disappear in a matter of minutes. When it was over, she gathered her things and walked out of the conference room without saying a word. I should have felt satisfied, but I wasn't done yet. That evening, I called a meeting with Kevin Hartley. Kevin had been trying to reach me all day, probably hoping to get more information about my fake investment opportunity. He agreed to meet me at the same overpriced bar where we'd talked before, no doubt expecting to finally cash in on what he thought was inside information. "David," he called out when I arrived, "I've been thinking about what we discussed. I'm ready to move forward on that California deal." On mistake, I sat down across from him, noting the eager greed in his eyes. Kevin had always been transparent in his motivations. He wanted money, status, and the respect he'd never earned through his own efforts. "Actually, Kevin, I wanted to talk to you about something else, about your conversation with Marcus Webb." Minimize. Setback's restriction shifted to confusion, then concern. "I don't know what you mean." "I mean the conversation you had with him 2 nights ago, at the coffee shop near Pike Place Market. The one where you offered to pump me for information about my business activities." Melts the color drained from Kevin's face. "David, I can explain." Fingered. "You don't need to explain. I have photographs of your meeting, phone records of your communications, and a complete understanding of what you were trying to do." Kevin tried to bluster his way out of it. "Look, Marcus approached me. He said he was just trying to understand the market better, that it would help him advise Rebecca more effectively. I thought I was helping the family business. By spying on me? Dismiss better communication between family members. The rationalization was pathetic, but entirely in character for Kevin. He'd spent his entire life finding ways to justify his failures and betrayals. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to resign from your position at NextGen, effective immediately. You're going to return any company property in your possession, and you're going to stay away from me and my business interests permanently. Rebecca won't let you fire me. Rebecca resigned from NextGen this afternoon. She no longer has any say in company personnel decisions. Kevin stared at me in shock. Resigned? Why would she resign? Because she was caught committing corporate espionage with her boyfriend. The same boyfriend you were helping to steal information from me. The full implications of what I was saying finally sank in. Kevin realized that he'd been caught up in something much bigger and more serious than he'd understood. What do you want from me? He asked. I want you gone. Out of my company, out of my life, out of Seattle if you're smart. Because if I see you again, if you try to contact me or interfere with my business in any way, I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Left the bar without another word, his dreams of easy money evaporating like smoke. The next morning, I had one final confrontation to handle. Marcus Webb had been released from police custody after 12 hours. Building security couldn't hold him indefinitely without formal charges. But Tommy had been tracking his movements, and we knew exactly where to find him. He was at the Fairmont Hotel, probably trying to salvage whatever he could from his relationship with Rebecca. The irony was perfect. He was waiting in the same room where this whole mess had started. I knocked on the door of room 1247. Marcus opened it, clearly expecting Rebecca. When he saw me, his face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, anger, fear, and finally, resignation. What do you want? He asked. I want to make you an offer. I pushed past him into the room. It looked exactly the same as every other luxury hotel room. King-size bed, expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city. But this room would always represent the moment my marriage died. You have nothing I want, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. I have evidence of your corporate espionage activities, financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations. Everything the FBI would need to put you in federal prison for the next 10 years. Marcus tried to maintain his arrogant facade, but I could see the fear in his eyes. You're bluffing. If you had real evidence, you would have gone to the police already. Who says I haven't? That stopped him cold. He stared at me for a long moment, trying to determine if I was lying. What kind of offer? He asked finally. Leave Seattle tonight. Don't contact Rebecca. Don't try to salvage any of your business relationships here. Don't even think about coming back. Disappear completely, and I'll consider not pressing charges. And if I don't, then I'll destroy you the same way I destroyed Rebecca. Your reputation, your career, your freedom, all gone. Marcus looked around the hotel room, probably thinking about all the afternoons he'd spent here with my wife, believing he was too smart and too charming to face consequences for his actions. You think you've won, he said, but you've lost everything too. Your wife, your marriage, your family. It's all gone. No, I replied. I've lost some things that turned out to be worthless, but I've gained something much more valuable. What's that? The knowledge that I'm not the weak, naive man you and Rebecca thought I was. I'm someone who fights back. Marcus packed his bags that night and left Seattle on a red-eye flight to Los Angeles. I never saw him again. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office, a corner suite in a downtown high-rise with a better view than I'd ever had before. NextGen Solutions had not only survived the scandal, but thrived under new leadership. Without the corporate espionage bleeding away our competitive advantages, we'd landed 3 major contracts and expanded into 2 new markets. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy Brennan. Thought you'd want to see this. Link led to a news article from the Los Angeles Times. Former Seattle consultant arrested in corporate espionage case. Marcus Webb had apparently tried to run the same scam on a tech company in California. But this time, he'd targeted the wrong executive. She'd been suspicious from the beginning and had worked with the FBI to build a case against him. He was looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. I was reading the article when my assistant knocked on my door. "Mr. Mitchell, there's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." Rebecca walked into my office looking nothing like the polished CEO I'd been married to for 15 years. Her hair was shorter, her clothes were off the rack instead of designer, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Hello, David." "Rebecca, I have to say, I'm surprised to see you." She sat down in the chair across from my desk, her hands folded in her lap like a penitent child. "I wanted to apologize," she said, "for everything. The affair, the corporate espionage, the lies. I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry." Studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but she just looked tired, defeated, genuinely remorseful. "What have you been doing with yourself?" I asked. "Working at a nonprofit in Portland, community development, helping small businesses get started. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work." The irony wasn't lost on me. Rebecca had gone from running a major corporation to helping mom-and-pop shops write business plans. "I heard about Marcus," she continued, "about his arrest in Los Angeles. Yes, I saw that too. Apparently, he never learned his lesson. I was such a fool, David. I let him convince me that what we were doing was just smart business, that everyone cuts corners to get ahead. I knew it was wrong, but I told myself it was okay because I deserved success, deserved to be happy." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I threw away everything good in my life for a man who never cared about me at all. He was just using me, and I was too proud and too stupid to see it. I felt a flicker of something. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding." Rebecca had been a victim too, in her way. Marcus Webb was a professional manipulator who targeted her weaknesses and exploited them ruthlessly. But that didn't excuse what she'd done to me, to us, to the company we'd built together. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I wanted you to know that you were right about everything. About Marcus, about me, about what kind of person I'd become. You saw through all of it when I couldn't even see it myself." She stood up, smoothing down her modest skirt. "I also wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. What you did, the way you fought back, the way you protected yourself and the company. It took courage and intelligence and strength that I never gave you credit for. Thank you," I said, and meant it. "I won't bother you again. I just needed you to know that I understand what I lost, and I know it was my own fault." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, David, you were a good husband. Better than I deserved." After she left, I sat in my office thinking about the past year, the betrayal, the investigation, the systematic destruction of everyone who'd wronged me. It had been the most difficult period of my life, but also the most clarifying. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, smarter than my enemies had assumed, and more ruthless than anyone had expected. I'd also learned that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to strike first and strike hard. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "David, it's Jim Patterson. I wanted to let you know. I just heard from a friend at the FBI. They're opening a formal investigation into Marcus Webb's activities in Seattle. They might want to interview you about what happened with NextGen." "I'll cooperate fully," I said. "I figured you would. But David, I wanted you to know that what you did, exposing the corporate espionage, protecting the company, it took guts. A lot of guys would have just filed for divorce and tried to move on." "Moving on isn't always an option," I replied. After I hung up, I walked to my office window and looked out at the Seattle skyline. The city looked the same as it always had, but my place in it had changed completely. I was no longer the naive, trusting husband who'd been blindsided by his wife's betrayal. I was someone who fought back, someone who won. Rebecca was right about one thing. I had been a good husband, loyal, supportive, generous to a fault. But those qualities had made me vulnerable to people who saw kindness as weakness and trust as an opportunity to exploit. I wouldn't make that mistake again. My assistant knocked on the door again. "Mr. Mitchell, Your 4 o'clock appointment is here. Slamming send them in. The future was waiting, and I was ready for whatever came next. I'd learned the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad or getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim. Marcus Webb was going to prison. Rebecca was starting over in a different city, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the knowledge that she'd destroyed everything good in her life through her own choices. Kevin Hartley had slunk back to whatever trust fund safety net would have him, his reputation in Seattle's business community permanently tarnished. And me? I was stronger, wiser, and more successful than I'd ever been before. They'd all underestimated the quiet man with the wire-rimmed glasses and the head for numbers. They'd thought they could manipulate me, steal from me, betray me without consequences. They'd learned otherwise. As I prepared for my next meeting, I allowed myself one final moment of satisfaction. The naive, trusting David Mitchell was gone forever, replaced by someone who understood that, in this world, you either fight back or get destroyed. I'd chosen to fight back, and I'd won.